Welcome back to Elm Elaborates. This is episode 4, materials, vendors, subcontractors, equipment, all the good stuff.
All of it. Ryan, we're talking about materials, list, equipment, and vendors. This is like a heavy episode because that is everything it takes to put these buildings together.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, so let's just start off with the materials.
Okay, yeah.
What are we doing? We're diving into the materials list. We're checking. But what does that all entail?
Yeah, so when we do these conversions, as we do them, we're trying new things, and then we make them our standard if we love them.
Yeah.
So, on some projects, we tried certain things, didn't love them, and moved away from them. Like a perfect example is twist timers. So when you walk through the facility, we only keep 1 out of every 3 or 4 light fixtures on. Well, in one of our projects, Reedsville, when you walk in there, basically every time you hit a hallway, there's a twist timer that you quite literally twist it.
Like a hot tub machine at a hotel.
Exactly.
I want my bubbles on.
Yeah. So you twist it, and it depends on how far you twist it, is how long the light stays on. So you could imagine, that saved us a bunch of money, not only on the material itself, because the other option is either keeping all the lights on or doing motion sensors.
Yeah.
So the twist timer itself saves some money because it's hooked up to the whole string of lights. So you just have one twist timer for a whole string. The problem with that is if you twist this thing, especially if you don't twist it far enough, you only gave yourself 12 minutes. Well, by the time you twisted that thing and you rolled your cart and you're in your unit unloading your stuff, 12 minutes is up. What happens? Light goes out.
Hey, go run and turn that twist timer again.
Yeah, especially if you're at the end of the hallway and you're like, all right,
you got to find it.
Yeah, you got to go find it and twist it. And that was something we explored. And I will say we did not make that our standard, Cameron.
That makes sense.
So we have gone to motion sensors, but they're not that frequent, but they're usually at the start and the ends of our hallways. Basically, once you walk into the hallway, there's this sensor right on the light fixture that sees you enter that hallway, and then it turns from 1 out of every 3 lights are on to the whole string of lights are on. Nice. So that'll give you good vision, and you'll be able to unload your stuff without it going dark on you.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's more than just twist timers. Even the HVAC. We're looking at, duct work, right? We're really getting into the nitty gritty.
Yeah. So the HVAC systems, you have a ton of options. What you can do, you could use commercial units. You could use basically residential units applied to a commercial setting, and what we have found that the residential size is good for us. So they're more readily available. A lot of people can service them. And they're more compact, and so we go with these smaller residential 3 to 5 ton units, and we have had a lot of success with those. Also with the ductwork, we basically just have a blower unit. What that means is that on one end we have the air that gets sucked in, that's your return, and then on the other end you have this blower with a 45-degree downturn, basically supply. So instead of running ductwork all throughout the facility, we have just more of these smaller units, and we don't have to run ductwork, because ductwork is really where a lot of the money comes from, and it's not so much about the material, but about the labor to run and hang all this ductwork, especially when you have your ceilings that are pitched different heights and stuff. You have to run hangers up top with unistrut and threaded rod, and you have to tie all this ductwork in. The ductwork takes a ton of time, and as we know, labor is very expensive, especially right now. And so with these blower units, these smaller, more frequent blower units, we're actually saving money by having more HVAC units, but virtually no ductwork throughout our facilities.
Loving the concept of saving money. Okay, so now we talked a little bit about HVAC, but there's things on the storage units themselves that we even look at and consider, like even liner panels.
Yeah, so that's a great example. When you have a unit that backs up to a wall, you really don't need liner panels there, because the liner panels will go in the rear of that. Yeah. So if you have this beautiful brick wall, what's the point of putting a metal liner panel when you already have a perfectly good surface there? So we really only use liner panels in certain situations where you have back-to-back units. Well, then you need a liner panel, because, you can't just, then you're just going to be able to take stuff out of the other person's storage unit, So we have to have a liner panel there. And another place where it gets tricky is windows. So when the facility has existing windows, because we do a ton of conversions, so there's windows placed randomly all throughout. It's just kind of weird that you would have a window that look into somebody's storage unit. People don't love that, so we add the liner panels there as well.
Yeah, and this also helps us with demo. Like if we have a wall up that we're like, okay, we're putting storage units there, I mean, do we need to demo this wall? Like every little bit, we are thinking of cost saving opportunities here. And we're like, okay. Or maybe even like we just talked about with Florence a little bit ago, yesterday with John, we had an opportunity to like, hey, maybe even turning an existing room that's already there into storage.
Yeah.
You know, like we're always looking at little nuances like that to just cost savings there.
Yeah, there's no point of like demoing a wall when you're going to put 2 units
To
there.
put walls up.
Yeah, to put walls up. I mean, you just put the units back to back, and then you save on the iron panel down the center.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. So these are some tips and tricks that we've learned while doing conversions. Yeah, so also in our offices, like most of our facilities have on-site managers.
Right.
And so the HVAC, we can either duct a unit to the office, but then the problem is that unit is also going to control a large area of the storage section. Yeah. So what we determined is that, especially in the long run, if we spend $2 or $3 grand to put a mini split into the office itself, the manager can climate control their office because the office should be more comfortable than the storage area. A lot of the big REITs and storage guys, they put their limits anywhere from like 60 to 80 degrees. And, if you're a storage manager, you can imagine sitting in an 80-degree office is kind of uncomfortable. So we decided that we just put mini splits in the offices, and that's the way that we can climatize our office instead of doing a whole section of the storage.
Well, that makes sense. Your tenant is usually in and out, right?
Yeah.
Boom. But your manager is going to be on site the entire time. We want them to be the most comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But other things that we explore is floor paint. We also want these buildings to be appealing to the eye. Yeah. But these are options that, like some floors are, when we buy these buildings, the concrete looks great.
Yeah.
There's not a lot we need to do. Maybe like a high gloss, but some of them, they just need a little bit of paint and really pops out the doors. Equipment wise, like we're looking at the doors of the units themselves. We're talking swing doors, we're talking roll up doors, even the door manufacturer, all these small little things that are cents on the dollar sometimes. We are calculating like, hey, where is our best value at? We have an option, a swing door, a roll up door, these options that we look at as we're getting our quotes back from our vendors. Yeah. And then the options there. What are some of the things that we like to see about our doors? Yeah, so it's twofold. One, the roll-up doors are nicer, so they are more expensive. Yeah. But they're wider and they go up higher, and it's just really nice for people that are moving in. Very large things like couches and shelves and all that kind of stuff. It's just nicer for them to have that option. But in some areas where we don't have the height clearance, we go with the swing doors. Those are definitely more affordable. And they serve as twofold. The roll-up doors have a big, basically, mechanism on top of them, which makes it hard when you have not a lot of height clearance. Yeah. The only problem is that they swing into the hallways. Yeah. So you can imagine that, if you had 2 people moving in, which honestly doesn't happen too often, and they both have the doors open to the hallway, it's just going to impede the hallway, which isn't ideal. So that's not really an option that we use too much, but when there's areas like mezzanines and stuff off to the side, we do go with the swing doors there. Yeah, always on our playlist. Yeah, it's one of our options. Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to talk about this next topic because it is one of my favorite. We're talking about trades, getting them out there, getting them on site. How do you find them? Where are we looking? What rocks are we turning over to find these amazing vendors? There are so many different methods to find vendors and subcontractors. Yeah. I'll take one method. Google. You ever done Google? I think I've heard of that. Yep. So, we will do basically certain radius around the town that we're building in, and just do a quick, simple Google search, and then we read the reviews. We make sure that most of the reviews are positive and people aren't just extremely dissatisfied with those contractors. I mean, that can honestly be very helpful for us. I will tell you, Ryan does this because he will send me, if I've picked a subcontractor, I'm looking at one, he will send me the Google review. He'll be like, hey, what about this? Look at this comment. And I'm like, they said it was the wrong person. Yeah. I was like, we literally are looking at the Google reviews, making sure that, hey, are these customers happy with the product these guys are providing? Yeah, and like one thing we want to check is like, are they licensed and insured? Like, sometimes you get those comments like, oh, we pulled a permit and this guy started work and he wasn't licensed. Yeah. So it's like, that's something that's very valuable. Obviously we are going to do our due diligence anyway, but just to know on the front end that we can't put the time and effort into the subcontractor if they're just a fly-by-night guy that's not going to come through for us. And of course, we don't, sign on anyone unless we get the feels. They come out to the job site. Of course, we have them walk with our supers, just walk them through, make sure we're all on the same page, and you really get the feels for your sub that way.
Yeah.
And call their references too.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time and effort to vet a subcontractor, especially, it's not a subcontractor. Like when we're doing the paint scope or the mason, like we're getting 4 quotes. We're reaching out to probably 4 to 6 subcontractors per scope of work. And when you stack that on top of 20 scopes of work, I mean, just do the math. That's a ton of vetting that we're doing. Luckily, some of these are our core subcontractors and they travel with us. But then a lot of times, they get busy and they get tied up with their local stuff, and they just don't have the capacity to travel. So we have to reach deep into our archives and pull out different methods. You want to talk about the supply house method?
You know what? Dave Magnuson, one of the site supers that we have, really our newest site super, he told us this amazing trick, and it's literally calling the supply houses for what you're trying to look for. So if you're looking for a plumber, you're calling us a plumbing supply house. If you're looking for a painter, you're calling Sherwin-Williams, and you call these vendors. It's a simple phone call, and these guys are actually happy to give you the information because they're getting the business from them.
Right.
So you call your local vendor or your supply house, and you just ask them, hey, who are the top 3 vendors that are doing deals with you, the ones that have the most quantity, that have the biggest accounts?
Yeah. And
they'll let you know right off the phone, and then we just start doing our calls. That is one of my favorite ones. We have really found some great trades out of there, but, you're still just doing your due diligence the entire time. There's multiple supply houses throughout, so you got to figure out where are the biggest supply houses and how that works for us. So I love that one. That is probably one of my favorite tactics so far.
Yeah, I was surprised how much success we've had from that method. I mean, we've already signed up probably 5 subcontractors that way. And Dave just mentioned it the other day, and that's what's great about having really experienced team members. Both of our site superintendents that are working with us on our storage projects are extremely experienced. I mean, they've been in the business for 20, 30 years, each of them. So when they speak, we listen because they have really good advice and really good methods.
Yeah, because Google can be daunting, right? Like hey, I need a plumber, and then you get 20 listings. You're like, oh gosh, I got to go through all these. But if you talk to a supply house, they're like, hey, I got top 3 guys here that are producing the most. I mean, so it's very valuable. Another tactic is just bringing trades along. We have a trade on site. They do great work. We really enjoy them. Hey, can you travel? What's your radius? Are you willing to stay overnight? Are those options that we look for? And that's always a really good one. I think we've had some great partners, and we take them when we can.
Yeah. Another method is asking one trade for a reference on another trade. So
Correct.
A lot of times, like when you have HVAC and electrical, well, your electrical ties into your HVAC to bring it power, right? So these subcontractors are working together on a bunch of different projects. So when we sign up a really great electrician, let's say, we'll ask them like, hey, who does a bunch of the HVAC work that you see on your projects? And then they'll give us a reference for a person, and then we kind of just, and it's the foremans know each other, all the site guys know each other, so it kind of works out that way too because they're familiar with working with one another. Because all these trades, it's not like they just do their thing, they get in and they get out. They have to coordinate with our site super and all these other trades to make this project happen. So that's a really good method too.
Yeah. Especially like, what is that relationship like? HVAC and electricians, they work hand in hand so well that it's like, hey, who have you never had an issue with?
Yeah.
Like, who comes out here and wires up your stuff is flawless every time? Like, hook us up with that person.
Yeah. Drywallers and painters.
That is, that's a little different because
they don't always get along.
No, they do not. But it's beneficial to have your painter and your drywaller be one.
Yeah. If you can make that happen.
If you can make it happen.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. And then there's small mom and pops, I would say, punch crews that we enjoy that have really, I feel like one in particular off the top of my head, we have helped them flourish. They're almost going to be able to go out on their own because we give them so much work.
Yeah. We basically mentor them on how to run a business, especially with a larger commercial project. Because some of these people are used to doing residential stuff, and they don't know like what net 30 is, or they don't know like how to get their insurance and stuff, and like
or bid a project.
Yeah, or bid on some work, right? So we kind of show them, and we show them what the requirements are for insurance policies. And like once they do that once, then they know how to do it the next time.
I mean, we're literally building partnerships
Yeah.
and relationships. That's what's the great thing is like, we know we have projects down the line. We would love to take you with us. You know, this is the thing that we need from you. And I think they thoroughly enjoy it.
Another method is the park at Home Depot and wait.
Hey.
So
not against that.
Yeah. So sometimes we just send each other pictures of painters and drywallers and electricians.
Look at the back of this shirt.
Yeah, the back of people's shirt or their trucks in the Home Depot parking lot. That works well. We've gotten a few, like our painter across the street.
Yep.
That was just somebody, a truck parked and took a picture and sent it to the guys. So yeah, I mean that method works too. It's just the only problem with that is you usually don't have references that go along.
Yeah.
You have to really, really be smart about your due diligence when you find a subcontractor that way.
Yeah, I like it. Equipment. I would say there's not a lot of equipment that we use because, of course, we have vendors and we kind of throw that on them. Like, hey, if you're coming to do this work, equipment is included in your bid, right?
Yeah.
But what are some of the other things that we have on job sites?
So the one thing I could think of is the dumpsters. You know, it costs a lot of money for us to keep a dumpster on site all the time. So it's project specific, but like Lexington's a perfect example of when we were very sparse in keeping a dumpster on site, because not only do the trades just throw a bunch of stuff in there when they could take it to their facility and throw it out, but you get people that throw in like couches and mirrors, a lot of glass. Like that happened in Gastonia. Wasn't too pleased with that. So we try to limit the amount of dumpsters we keep on site. It costs us more money, it costs us in rental fees and just sitting there, and the weight. Actually, the dumpsters are priced based on how long they've sat on your job site and then the weight of all the basically garbage that's dumped in the field.
Yeah, correct. I've actually, there's been a time where I've actually seen an entire vending machine in a roll-off dumpster before. I was like, okay, how did this end up here?
Yeah.
Like, you always show up to a job site, you're like, okay, we don't use couches, so why is there one in my dumpster right now? Because people just take it as a free-for-all.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, like, golden metal gates in there. I'm like, well,
come
I know
on.
that wasn't us.
Yeah. This is really hard to keep track of. You know,
Yeah.
and that's why we don't keep them on the site for very long.
Yeah.
Like, we're in and out.
In and out. Yeah.
This is what we're using it for.
Yeah. There is sometimes where we do rent heavy equipment, whether it be Sunbelt Rentals, A to Z, United. Our site supers can operate heavy machinery, so sometimes when we get bids for like exterior grading work, that's usually comes in very, very high. Grading and earth moving is really expensive, and we're not doing a lot of it because we're doing conversions, but sometimes over the years, there's the dirt on the side of the building is sloped towards the building, and when it rains, it's kind of pushing the water towards the building, which obviously we don't want. Yep. So like Gastonia, we rented heavy equipment, and John Serva sat on that machine for a couple days, honestly. He spent several days giving us the fall that we needed away from the building.
Yeah, it was nice. We also have man lifts that sometimes we'll rent. We've actually procured one in the past for ourselves, so we take that around from job site to job site. That helps us cut down on that equipment cost. But yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot that we own equipment-wise or that we use on these job sites.
Yeah, we try to keep it to a minimum. If we rent something and put it on the job site, all these trades will use it, and then we'll be responsible for it, and then everybody will say they need it for their scope of work. It's just easier to put that on them, and then they're responsible for getting it dropped off, picked up, the maintenance, any deposits put down the equipment. It's just so much easier to do it that way.
Correct.
We found.
Yeah.
Also, with equipment, sometimes we look at options that will alleviate us from having to rent any equipment, and I think the LVLs, the structural supports for Kernersville, is a perfect example. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the LVLs for Kernersville, the basement, it called out 3.5-inch LVLs that are 20 to 24 foot long. I mean, you're talking massive LVLs. These are hundreds of pounds, right? So just going back and forth with the engineer, trying to okay, first of all, 3.5 LVLs, you're going to have to get that manufactured. That's a special order. Yeah. That's not just something that BFS or any lumber supplier just has on hand. Yeah. So, we look at that and go, okay, can we just do 2 1 3/4, to get us to where we need, get the sign off from the engineer, and then we send that to, the lumber supplier, and they say, yeah, okay, we can make that happen. But now you've just reduced that weight of that LVL dramatically, right? Yeah. So now you're taking away the equipment that is needed to lift those LVLs, because now you can just use manpower, really, to get those in place.
Yeah, and then also we don't have to worry about getting a forklift into the basement.
Yeah.
Or,
how do we get that in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, pretty much can't. Yeah.
Can't do it, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great example of how we just kind of adjust our methods and means to not need equipment.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, we also help these vendors think through.
Yeah.
And it's not just us like, hey, this is a scope of work, figure it out. We're like, hey, let's figure out how we can do this together, build that partnership.
Yeah, especially big help from our site superintendents.
Yes,
Yeah.
Always shout out to them. Site supers. Yeah, that's, I mean, just these are all things that go into this process of building these amazing facilities, turning these, as I like to say, these ugly ducklings into these beautiful swans. But I mean, we consider all these every time, every job site, like, I mean, almost every week, we're talking to our site supers, considering our options, and just making sure we're getting the best value for what we're trying to do here.
Thanks for watching. That's another episode of Elm Elaborates materials, equipment, vendors, subcontractors. Just a quick look into how we do some of the things we do.
Yeah, and if you like what you hear, please click that like and subscribe button. We're always looking for comments as well, just so we can make sure we're bringing you the best content.
Yeah. Thanks.